This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Oh, my goodness. Murderer's Row. A lot of teams got knocked off the block. That's why we have the NBA Final Four. So, of course, it's autopsy report time. So let me go ahead and get my resident surgeon, you know what I'm saying, as my man Lonzo Harris say, you know what I'm saying, get my man Shaw so he can get surgical in this ish. www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna, PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Yo, hey, man, Shaw, bro. I'm feeling a little salty today, man. You got to ask me why.
Why is that, homie? Why is that?
Because I swear I'm hearing Tony Reali from ESPN's Around the Horn talking about autopsy reports.
Stop it.
I'm not joking, bro. I really think that he's been listening to our joint, man. I'm not trying to say he biting, but I'm just wondering where he got that from. Because I know that there's only one originator. I know there's only one original Jazzo in this piece, and that would be you, my brother. So I want to know where Tony Reali got this autopsy report nonsense from that he whipped out on Around the Horn.
Well, I mean, I guess it's a good idea. At least I think it is. We think it is. But, if someone wants to borrow or infringe in some way, whatever, we don't have anything copyrighted, but it's all good, man. I think our autopsy reports are the nicest. Our tools are the sharpest. Our wit is the brightest. And that's why we keep doing what we do, fam. So let them do what they need to do.
And in the immortal words of Velveeta, go on get. You know what I'm saying? Go find your own terrain to mess with. Yeah. Old school, brother. Old school. So, of course, man, we have got a great show on tap, man. It's that time, man. We got 4 teams who are going to get bodied up as we give you our rendition of the autopsy reports. Philadelphia 76ers, Utah Jazz, New Orleans Pelicans. And I know, man, if y'all saw my tweets, after the Cavaliers disbanded the Toronto Raptors, man, you know where we had to save them for last, bro. Oh my goodness, we had to save them for last. So we got a great show on tap. Once again, we'd like to thank you and yours for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. Download that platform, throw on your headphones, kick back, relax, and watch us body up some of these teams, these fallen teams, and give you the goods of what's happening right now in the association. So you know how we do, and you know how we roll. Time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
To the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, the Baseline NBA podcast. About that time, got a lot of bodies to observe, to examine, to CSI. It's that time again. It's the autopsy report. My man Shaw and I talk about how the season translated for some of these teams and what's going to happen with them moving forward. We got 4 teams on slate. Philadelphia 76ers, Utah Jazz, New Orleans Pelicans, and the Toronto Raptors. Shaw, let's go ahead and start off right now with the Philadelphia 76ers. Listen, if not for a few games here or there in this semifinal round series against the Boston Celtics, man, it could be the Boston Celtics that we'd be talking about being as part of our autopsy report, not the Philadelphia 76ers. Nonetheless, the Boston Celtics got the job done. And I really think that they did expose a few things that the Philadelphia 76ers are really going to have to start looking at as they head into this offseason. It's interesting how everybody believes that the way to fix whatever the problems were for the Philadelphia 76ers is by going out and getting LeBron James.
Yeah, well, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think when you have the team that was this close, they were still competitive, very competitive 5 games. But it came down to late game execution. And you hope and pray that as a roster, as an organization, even from the coaching staff, that they learn from that and understand what they need to do. In essence, when they get into that situation again next year or whenever it happens for them. This is a team that is obviously set up for a large amount of future success. Great cap situation. Everybody's pretty young. The veteran guys they have were on affordable contracts. You can argue JJ Redick's contract's a little steep. He's on a 1-year deal. Does he return? But either way, this team really, really came together at the right time. Unfortunately, ran into a better young, disciplined team than they were currently. And I think they were a lot of they got into a little bit of the theatrics of the series, especially in the case of Embiid. You wanted to maybe see him be a little bit more mature in certain aspects, but at this point, he is who he is, and that's kind of what makes him so exciting and fun to watch. But when is it time to kind of like turn maybe some of that stuff off and just focus in and give that other team that work?
It's all mental, man. It is all mental for this Philadelphia 76ers team. It's interesting, Shaw. Everybody's thinking that sometimes it's always about the personnel. You got to add this person, you got to add that person. This team last year wasn't in the playoffs, and they already made the semifinals. One, with their players, their marquee players being fully healthy. Two, the management actually put solid pieces around those players. We often talk about how sometimes some general managers, I know a lot of people are going to knock Brian Colangelo and those and company with the moves that they made, to get themselves even to this point was very questionable. But if it yielded a 50-win season for this team and it yielded them being in the semifinals, I don't want to hear that noise. They obviously know, at least they're good enough to know at least what they need to do in order for them to continue to be good. Okay. The last thing that you want them to be is reckless, because this is a young basketball team. But this is all mental, man. Okay. Ben Simmons him not taking really any shots. You know what I'm saying? Outside of the perimeter. It's always been driving the back. That's mental, man. It doesn't matter if you make or you miss. You have to at least show the opposition that you are willing to shoot the basketball. And if a team is laying off from you, you make them pay for that. Joel Embiid, all mouth, and don't realize he needs to save his breath to continue to run up and down the basketball court because it's the playoffs and you're going to be playing for 40-plus minutes. Markelle Fultz. Need I say more? A lot of the issues with the Philadelphia 76ers, Shaw, is mental. And they need to work on that before they need to work about restructuring this roster. Because you can equate what this Philadelphia 76ers team did this year again for next year without doing anything. It's just going to come down to, are they mentally prepared to take it to that next level?
Right, and there's nobody that I don't think would disagree with it. Yes, Boston was superior in terms of the mental aspect of the game, and just had better late game execution, better adjustments overall. And like we said, this entire team and organization learned from this experience and is going to come back and get stronger. But we do have to address, exactly how do they continue to do that? Yes, they have an amazing core with Embiid and Simmons, and then you add to the fact that Fultz should be healthy next year. Show some nice flashes. Does he assume the point guard position right now, or do they bring him off the bench? But it is the supplemental pieces that are around this roster that you have to figure out. Only $70 million committed in salary next year, man. $70 million. They got some stuff to play with. But you can't trade these minor contracts for a guy like Kawhi Leonard. You can sign LeBron James. You can maybe sign Paul George. But then what does that do for the rest of this team that you need to fill around it? So I would be interested to see what their take on it is going to be. I do feel like they'll probably bring a lot of these guys back kind of right now, maybe with the exception of Amir Johnson. Would probably like to get a more adequate backup big behind Embiid. But Sarge is great, man. He's a great basketball player at the power forward position. Still a guy who I think should have won Rookie of the Year last year over your guy, Malcolm Brogdon. But nevertheless, this team has a lot of potential moving forward if they can bring everybody back, especially in the cases of Ilyasova and Bellinelli, two veteran guys who played extremely well for them. You bring them back at whatever it is, $10 million a year or something like that, kind of almost in the Amir Johnson range right now. Then you really got to figure out what you do with Redick one way or another too, and then I think you'll be set.
All right, so here's the thing. Let me just go ahead and throw this out there really quick, Shaw. LeBron James is available. Hey, maybe even Kawhi Leonard is available, right? And you're going to make a play. Do you think that the Philadelphia 76ers figure out a way to move Covington in his contract?
It's not enough, not for those guys. You have
no,
to
but what I'm saying, I'm saying is that do you figure out a way to move Covington at
No.
You figure out a way to keep him, right?
I feel like you keep him as a backup small forward, who can play even some small ball forward if you need to. If you get LeBron, Kawhi, or Paul George over there, you have enough to kind of get that done. Now, if it becomes some sort of situation where you need to trade for Kawhi, then Covington's contract is decent enough where it can add to the value of trying to trade for equal value one way or another. But this was a year, ironically, where he had a spike. He was owed $17 million this year, and they kind of leveled it out. So he's only owed 10.5 next year. It becomes a little bit harder to do. But either way, I can't see them wanting to break that up because again, they have money to play with, and they can deny the options of McConnell if they want to. They can deny the option of Richaun Holmes if they want to, and they can free up a couple extra dollars that way as well too. They're in good shape cap wise, but trading for star level talent is where they're not good shape, and that's why LeBron and Paul George become more of an option than Kawhi because you have to actually trade to get Kawhi over there.
And I guess part of the thing that really concerns me is what are we seeing from Robert Covington, right? Like I feel like something happened to him through the course of this NBA playoffs. He was just basically non-existent, and I don't want to. I hate trying to make a comparison to him, but I feel like it's a little similar to Harrison Barnes, like where the organization sees him as an intricate piece. And I think maybe in some level of degree, this is probably part of the reason why they may have went out so all in on trying to get JJ Redick and get additional shooters because Covington is a wild card. So what happens to Covington come this year, Shaw? Like, what do you do with this guy? Because when we were talking about the core, if you remove Markelle Fultz from the picture, then wouldn't it have been the shooting of Covington, his defensive play, and all of that, which would equal out to how this team rounds about with the superstar talent, he being a part of that picture? Where is it that he doesn't fit in that fold same way that he did when they gave him the contract?
Well, I think he fits. I think we're going off some sort of recency bias right now in the last two games where Brett Brown needed to put McConnell out there because he was just being more effective against what Boston was trying to do. But Covington was their starter the entire year, had his ups and downs with his shooting overall, but always played good defense. Very sneaky around the rim, gets a lot of deflections. I think he's one of the top 3 or 5 guys, in deflections in the NBA. Always trying to strip the ball after a rebound and trying to get some sneaky steals as well too. He has a role for this team, but I think you want him to be more efficient, obviously, with his 3-point shot, especially if he's going to shoot as many threes as he does, and then just kind of buy into what they're trying to do overall, offensively and defensively. I think he's good. He's a good rotation player, at a very reasonable contract for what they want to do. And whether or not they continue to start him or if they bring him in a role that's back up off the bench, I think he can thrive in either role because they have enough overall talent around him.
All right, who's the one that has the most upside for this upcoming season? Fultz, Simmons, or Embiid?
I think you want to see what Simmons does moving forward. I not say that Embiid can't get better, but I think with Simmons specifically, you want to see the development of that jump shot, so that where he's not shy to take it and he can continue to shoot it, or he can attack the rim and get to the basket without necessarily the way that the Boston Celtics were playing him, just saying, all right, just stay out here. He's got to be able to continue to be aggressive and take advantage of mismatches. And that, too, goes back to your earlier point in terms of just his overall mental toughness. He allowed Boston in certain parts of the series to just kind of take him out of his game and where he didn't feel strong enough or confident enough to go and attack the rim. So that's what you want to see. But it's hard to say that and say, okay, well, which is more important? Because they really do need to see what Fultz develops into and his jump shot and his ability to penetrate and his ability to play make as well, too. I think Embiid is nearing he's closer to his zenith, so to speak, than I think Simmons or Fultz are.
Man, so what are we talking about with Fultz, man? I mean, what are we really saying? Do you think that Fultz's psyche has been damaged? And I'm saying that in the same way that we talked about Jahlil Okafor.
I think it's a good question, but I think it's too early to tell with that. I don't think Fultz is there right now where he's not sure of himself. But yes, this wasn't the rookie year that he was hoping for, and he won't qualify to be rookie of the year next year, no matter what happens. So that's out the window.
I'm sure he was wishing he was still playing for Washington. He didn't redshirt him. So yeah,
it's funny to me, ironically, because they could have not played him this entire year, and would it have made any difference? They brought him back. It is what it is. And so now he doesn't qualify as rookie year. That's fine. But I definitely want to see how he responds, how well he plays over the summer. If he doesn't even play in summer league, might be too good for that, at least in theory. But I think it's about his own overall mentality. does he stay humble and stay on the grind and understand that this team got to where they got to kind of without him? Does he come back now and then allow them to reach that next level, that next step? And that's what everybody thinks, man. But while we're talking about this guy, listen, it's going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but we really need to credit the play of Dario Saric and how good he's played within this system. I think he's just perfect for what they're trying to do. Picks his spots, tries to do the right thing at all times. Can get a little wild at times, though, without a doubt, but I think he's a great complement to the combination of Simmons and Embiid.
Yeah, listen, I don't disagree with you one bit. Sarge party was in full effect, man, and he really showed out in the playoffs. I'm interested in your take about Brett Brown and what he did, Shaw, before we move on to the next team. What are your thoughts about Brett Brown's coaching?
I mean, overall, I mean, he needed to learn himself. I think he kind of sat back and just said, all right, I'm only going to play it this way, which is you can't do that in the playoffs. Then he made the great move to bring in McConnell. And then that was semi-neutralized, in Game 5. I think Smart played him a little bit as well, too, but also switching Tatum off of Sarge a little bit, too. So, again, it's always about adjustments for sure. I wasn't ready to throw Brett Brown under the grave after they were down 0-3 like many people were.
Yeah, I don't understand where everybody's getting all of this nonsense about, Brett Brown.
I understood. I just wasn't on board.
Nah, man, I'm not buying that. Look, Brett Brown, and I feel bad for him because of everything that he's endured over the last few seasons. I think all he wanted was to be able to kind of coach these kids, and it was a revolving door of ineptitude that happened. And he finally got an opportunity to do that, and he got these guys. And people are not even giving credit. Let's remember, this team at the midway point was hovering around the 8th seed in the NBA Eastern Conference playoff picture. So that means they had to win important games in the second half of the season to position themselves to be where they were, right? And let's keep in mind that in that stretch, there was injuries. Simmons and Embiid went down to injury. And somehow Brett Brown got those guys to play, stay consistent, and they still wound up with 50-plus wins, which is the first time in God only knows how long. I just don't understand how people suddenly flip the switch. He has a bad coaching series against one of the best coaches in the game right now in Brad Stevens, and suddenly we're trying to talk about he shouldn't be the guy coaching this team if they make a play and get a marquee player like Paul George or LeBron James.
Well, that's just disrespect to the process. And I think if there's anybody who deserves to be there and at least to see this out for at least a couple of years, it's definitely Brett Brown. And I think the Philadelphia organization understands that. But it's always about coaching. I was listening to some show the other day where they talked about it, where it's just like, listen, no matter what happens in Philadelphia, the coaches are always the first ones to get questioned. It doesn't matter what the players do. The coaches always take the heat. So, I think Brett Brown is just a victim of the culture of the city that he coaches in.
All right, well, kudos to the Philadelphia 76ers as they almost tried to replicate what the Philadelphia Eagles did, but their silver lining playbook got cut short. 52-win regular season, semifinals, not bad at all with the process and company. All right, let's go ahead and focus our attention, Shaw, to the next team that needs to get bodied up, and that being the Utah Jazz. A little humbling in the sense that, when you think about this Utah Jazz team, Shaw, this is, again, we often try to harken back to the Stockton Malone years, where it was inconceivable that the Utah Jazz would never be in an NBA playoffs, right? If it's being coached by Jerry Sloan. And we've just seen intermittent periods of where they're competitive. But I think over the last couple of years under Quinn Snyder, they have resurrected the greatness of this being a competitive basketball team that will always, they should always be in the forefront of our thought process about being a playoff basketball team. And now that they have Donovan Mitchell, and this was the Donovan Mitchell coming out party, this is a team that can be a force to reckon with. And, what they showed us in the first round and even against the Houston Rockets is nothing short of what reminds us of Utah Jazz basketball.
Yeah, great solid core. As you mentioned, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, even Ricky Rubio and Joe Ingles. I think that quartet, so to speak, is pretty solid. And they lost Cephalosha to a season-ending injury, and again, not that he's part of the core of what they're doing, but he would even make that team even more lethal defensively. So I think this is a team that should come back. Jay Crowder was a nice addition midseason and getting off the Rodney Hood situation and not having to pay Hood, which I know they're very excited about that. But they got some questions, man. They really do. As great as this young team seems to be, and They're in decent cap shape, all of that. Favors is a huge part of what they do, not in the same productivity way in terms of statistically that Sarge was in Philadelphia, but Favors does a lot of the dirty work and the intangibles, especially defensively, that they need him on that roster. But what are they going to do now? At 26 years old, $12 million a year is what he made this year. Favors is going to be looking for a nice payday. Not a lot of money out there, so does he take roughly the same thing to kind of come back? I don't know, but that's something they got to figure out. They got to figure out the situation with Dante Exum. Are they going to bring him back now to play behind Ricky Rubio as well too? Some key questions for what they want to do overall, but their coaching is very stable. Their core is very stable. It's just the supplemental parts that make you wonder a little bit. Can they come back and reiterate some of the same success?
What the hell are they going to do with Alex Burks, man? I almost forgot that this dude was on the roster. And then suddenly now he became like an important player that Quinn Snyder relied upon, especially when Donovan Mitchell went into foul trouble. Ricky Rubio was out for the series against the Houston Rockets. And he showed me something, and it's funny to me, man. It's like, it's the same thing that we were asking Rodney Hood to show us, Alec Burke finally getting a little bit of run. But again, he's one of those type of players where, if you don't have any confidence of putting that guy in consistently, or if he's just totally injury prone, you can invest your money elsewhere to give you what Alec Burks gave you, unless there's something about him that means that he should be playing for this Utah Jazz team. Because there's only so many positions that you're going to be able to fill, Shaw, that you're saying is going to help elevate you to that next level, unless you're saying you're finding, those marquee free agent players to come play for them, which rarely ever happens for the Utah Jazz.
Well, I'm going to throw out a crazy option that, may make us lose some followers or people listening,
or maybe lose their mind. We don't want to lose followers, but you can lose your mind.
But I think if you try, and I think maybe they did try earlier in his career, but do you make Alec Burks almost kind of into a Donovan Mitchell light? And I say that in terms of his playmaking. Do you go back to the drawing board and say, listen, Burks, we want you to help us develop, and be kind of like a point guard off the bench. And I think if he can do that and play in that role, that might be something where they can figure that out. They would have to make the decision between him or Dante Exum. And I know they like Exum because of his hard defense, but he's another one who hasn't been healthy, but he's also younger.
Dante Exum is an excited little jackrabbit. He is all over the place, bro. He is, and maybe that tenacity, that energy is great, but it makes for a lot of reckless basketball. And I saw glimpses of that in numerous occasions through the course of the playoffs, where when they had Dante Exum out there, he really is like, I don't know what you're gonna do with this kid. I think he can possibly be a great talent if you harness the energy properly, but he's so reckless, bro. He's like an Emmanuel Mudiay, out of control. And I don't know what you do with that if you're a disciplined basketball team like the Utah Jazz that has a focus, right? Like, there's certain things that that are going to have to improve on. I don't know if you're going to get all of that from Dante Exum, which to me, if you're going to say between the two, I would definitely keep Alec Burks before I keep Dante Exum.
Oh, and like I said, Burks is 4 years older than Exum, so that's what it boils down to. But you don't know what it costs. Burks has 1 year left on his deal. They got to figure out a way. I think they tendered a restricted offer for Exum, so they can match something that he gets out there. But what does Dante Exum command in this upcoming market when there's not a whole lot of money out there? So it's an interesting situation. But I do want to go back
especially with Doncic. He's going to be available, right? And I get that the international flair a lot of people are keening on, but I do think that people are starting to kind of slow their roll a little bit. Like, the fusion of the international players is great, but they're really eyeing in on what is it that you do, and do you do it damn well? Because if we're going to have to put you in one of these project situations, it's not going to do. There are too many bodies right now in the NBA that for you to be marginally better, but just because you're from another country, I don't think is going to cut it anymore. I really think that if Dante Exum expects to see himself continuing to play in this NBA, he has got to improve on something from the offensive side of the ball, either cut down on the turnovers, be a better leader when it comes to as a point guard, or, shoot the basketball a hell of a lot better. But he's got to figure out something and do it well, because I think the time is running out for him.
Yeah, that's true. And I think some people, maybe very, very few people, they may argue that, even Raul Neto has developed better and just by virtue of being healthy, more so than Exum has, and is he somebody who you can put into a backup point guard type of role? I don't know, but the one question that I do want to get your opinion on specifically is, what do you think they should do with Derek Favors? Do you feel like he's important to this roster overall, or can they go out there and get, like you've been saying, somebody more serviceable that might be a little bit cheaper for what they want to do and kind of fill a similar role?
I really feel like Derek Favors could be a great piece. I think it really comes down to, can Derek Favors be more than that? The problem that really exists when you ask that question is, how does that relate to how Quinn Snyder uses it, works with this basketball team? And I just really feel like Quinn Snyder marginalizes Derek Favors. Like, I think that they're good, but don't expect great through this relationship of theirs. You know what I mean? Like, you can see Quinn Snyder working through Donovan Mitchell. You can see him working through Ricky Rubio and Rudy Gobert, and maybe even to Joe Ingles. But I've often always felt that Derek Favors has been more of the outsider. And I just feel like, again, if you're talking about the Utah Jazz building towards something, there are only so many positions in this starting five that you really have to start looking at saying, who do I want to try and put in there that I think can help me elevate this team to the next level, where we're a 55-plus win type basketball team, 60 wins, because that's what it's going to take if you're going to still have the kind of competitiveness going on in the Western Conference. And usually that 3-4 position is a position where you might hit the right spot in getting a kind of player that you want to take you to that next level, to supplement what you're getting from Donovan Mitchell. So I think that if I'm the Utah Jazz, I really should think about looking elsewhere with Derek Favors, but not because I think Derek Favors isn't a good basketball player. I just don't see the symbiotic relationship working well under this Quinn Snyder system. I think he'll always continue to get marginalized.
I mean, I guess that's a possibility. I think Favors is very valuable to what they do in general, but you have Crowder on a very much a smaller deal, a very manageable deal, and then if you want to play, kind of stretch forward Crowder, you can. Again, he's not as nearly as physical as Favors is. Like, let's not get it twisted, but he's more versatile in terms of what he can do defending. But he's not a rim protector like Favors is. So right. You kind of have to give to take, in that case. But I think they can look at that situation and starting Crowder out the 4 next year if they were to lose Favors, or not get somebody else that they really like. But I guess, the elephant in the room is really just, what do you think the next phase of development is for Donovan Mitchell? Where do you want to see him progress the most at? Outside of obviously getting the turnovers down a little bit, where do you think the next step of his evolution is going to be?
I think he needs to be a scorer. Listen, we don't often equate the Utah Jazz as having a scorer, but we're in this type of era where teams don't necessarily reflect who they traditionally are. Some teams can get away with doing that, and some teams can't. But I think it's all part of the picture of where you have with your head coach. I really think that Quinn Snyder truly believes that if you have a healthy Ricky Rubio, Donovan Mitchell won't nearly be as ball-handed heavy as he had to be through the course of this NBA playoffs. And if he's somebody that can continue to elevate his shooting ability, his playmaking ability, I think that is a very solid backcourt for the Utah Jazz. And you can work with the elements of your front court, because Ricky Rubio, to me, is kind of the gatekeeper. He's the bridge between helping Donovan become that primary 25-point, 30-point score a night type player and still get you buckets for guys like Crowder, like Gobert, like Ingles. I think it could work well. And I think if you're Donovan Mitchell, the next level, aside from you watching all 97 games that you played in this past season, I think the next level for you is shooting the basketball better than what you did this year. But I think a healthy Rubio will help offset some of those turnovers that he experienced through the course of the season.
Yeah, they definitely was a work in progress with Mitchell throughout the year. And, again, I think I talked about it on one of the shows we were on earlier, that this was an experiment in the making. And a lot of Mitchell's success was due to Rodney Hood's failure, because Hood started the season injured once again. That forced Snyder to play Mitchell some, maybe more than even he wanted to. And then they did have him running off point guard a little bit. Then they brought him at the 2. And then it just kind of naturalized itself over the course of the season. But as much as credit as I want to give this team and this roster, like I said, it really was. They were almost a victim of good circumstances in some ways, where they just kind of had to play the kid, and he just really capitalized on his opportunity. So now that they know who he is and what he's about, they can't go back, and hopefully he does take that next step in his game.
Well, I will, and I'll also say this, Shaw, before we move forward. Donovan Mitchell did himself justice by learning to play the point guard position in the way that Snyder needed him to. One of the things that has often plagued the Utah Jazz is that they've never had a healthy point guard, right? We've seen this even with Darren back in the days with Darren Williams. I mean, he wasn't under Quinn Snyder. But what I'm saying is that for whatever reason, the point guard position has been a liability since John Stockton left left the basketball team. Okay, and I feel like they've struggled when they've asked some of their other guards, and it usually maybe the way that they go about how they draft, like they try to draft the traditional straight up point guard type prototype. In those situations, they do themselves a disservice because now they're asking other guys to try and be combo guards, and they're not good combo guards. But Donovan Mitchell is one of those guys. Maybe it's because of how he played under Rick Pitino when he was in Louisville, but he was one of those guys that learned to play that position to give himself a chance, to give himself those minutes. And I think Quinn Snyder recognized that very quickly, and I think he understands. I think he may be one of the few coaches that knows Donovan Mitchell well enough to say, I need him at this level, and I think he's going to do all that he can to get the Utah Jazz organization to put him in the best position to be at that level. And I think it starts with them securing that point guard position. So if Ricky Rubio, like I said before, is healthy, Donovan Mitchell, because he showed you he could play the point guard, but if I'm Quinn Snyder moving into this offseason, I want him being my scorer. I want him to be my go-to guy.
Well, I'm just going to end with this on Utah. I love how you just threw Darren Williams under the bus, saying that Utah didn't have a point guard after John Stockton. But no worries. Let's keep it moving. Who are we going to body up next?
Why do you nitpick at everything? Am I just not wording it correctly? Maybe I'm just not wording it correctly. Am I wrong, though, in what I'm trying to say, Shaw, in that Darren Williams, he was injury prone. When he was on the floor, he was effective, but he was injury prone.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about that.
Listen, I could be cruel and say, he basically submarine Carlos Boozer's career. But I'm not going to go there. Right. But this is the autopsy report, and I am about bodying up some guys. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our subject of the breakdown, autopsy report. We just finished discussing the Utah Jazz. Coming up, we're going to discuss the New Orleans Pelicans. Definitely a season to remember, and hopefully for them, part of it being a season to forget, here on the Baseline NBA Podcast. We're back, Callie, Warren, Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, and this is the autopsy report. 2 more teams ready to go on the slab. So let's go ahead and talk about the New Orleans Pelicans, Shaw. Listen, by all accounts, everybody thought once Boogie Cousins went down, oh, Lordy, here we go again. But they figured out a way to get to the playoffs. They figured out a way to basically zip up the Portland Trailblazers twice, like bury them, dig them out, and then bury them back even deeper. And then they ran up against the best team, arguably, this year again with the Golden State Warriors. I will say this. If Anthony Davis is going to be like what we saw second half of the season, all the way up until this playoffs, there really is no excuse for Alvin Gentry figuring out a way to get these guys to be a 55-plus win type basketball team. There really isn't. And I say that because I am sick and tired of seeing great players have these like momentary stints of greatness. And then you have other good players surrounding them that we tend to kind of pawn off the idea that it's because of them that, they're not good or this, that, and the third. There is no excuse, man. There really isn't. The Pelicans are a good basketball team. And maybe playoff Rondo, crazy Rondo, Hondo Rondo, whoever you want to call this dude, maybe he's the key to bringing it together, whether it be on a short-term or hopefully a long-term basis. But if you're talking about this Pelicans basketball team, this should be a good basketball team coming into this upcoming offseason.
Well, as constructed, yes, but we cannot even go anywhere talking about this team without talking about what they're going to do about DeMarcus Cousins, number one, and even Rajon Rondo, number two. Those two guys are keys to what they want to do as an organization, and they've got to figure out from a financial standpoint how they can keep everybody together. Can try to max out Cousins. That's really going to stretch you out well over the cap. And then what do you have left for Rondo? Do you get him to take a mid-level exemption again or not? He's 32 years old, so that's questionable. I feel like you have to try to bring this core back one way or the other. Yeah, you can lose a guy like Ian Clark. He was all right. Maybe try to dump the salary of Solomon Hill somewhere, who didn't really give you much, for the season, battle some injuries. But overall, it starts with Cousins and Rondo in terms of them returning to see how great this team can be. Because yeah, you mentioned saying they should be a 50-plus win, a 55-win team. They got 48. That's without Cousins for half the season. But Cousins and Rondo both coming back. Can they get to that level? And I think they need both of them in order to reach the goals that you're setting out for them.
This is tough, man. And I think part of the reason why I'm saying that, and that's the reason why I started with Anthony Davis. I really think that it's going to, I hate to say this, but I really think it's going to come down to Rajon Rondo, Shaw. I really do. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's only a few point guards that I really think can complement making those Twin Towers look really good. And Rajon Rondo is one of those guys. Now, whether or not Rajon Rondo decides to take less money, we don't know. Because to your point, he is 32 years old. He's probably seeing one more solid contract where he plays his position and how he plays his position for him. But if I am Rajon Rondo and I'm looking at this basketball team and I recognize how much of an impact and an influence I've had, you can discard all of the nonsense that happened to him in Sacramento. You can discard all of the nonsense that happened to him in the early parts of Chicago, because it was later revealed that Rajon Rondo was actually the most important basketball player last season that didn't participate in the playoffs. That made us almost talk about the Chicago Bulls in a different light. You know what I'm saying? And maybe even look at Dwayne Wade and Jimmy Butler in a different light, right? If I'm the New Orleans Pelicans, I would ask Rondo, how important is it for you to keep Boogie Cousins? Because I really felt like Rondo had it going with him, Holiday, and with Davis. And you can even throw Mirotic in the mix with this. And I think that that's going to be the key. If you're not going to find anybody that's going to be able to get this team to gel the way that Rondo is able to get these guys to gel, I'm talking from a system, gameplay perspective, right? It doesn't matter how much money you throw and whether or not you keep Boogie Cousins. I don't think you're going to replicate what you got from this basketball team. I think that the injury to Cousins was a blessing in disguise to really show where the key pieces are for the Pelicans to try and move this thing forward. If not, they're going to be back to the same level of stagnation that they've had for the last 3 years before Rondo got there.
Well, there you go.
I know. I'm just doing the outlandish today, man. I understand it, but maybe if you see it from where I'm coming from, Shaw, it's kind of like the Chris Paul effect. Sometimes an organization really does need to come to your best overall player, not the one that scores the most points, but the one that has the feel and the pulse of the basketball team to really help you move forward about what you're trying to do with the team. And we've seen that this Pelicans team has never had a true sense of direction. They just throw something and hopefully it sticks against the wall. And I really feel like the best move that they made for what they paid for in getting Rondo is what's brought this basketball team to look like what we thought that they were going to be like for the last couple of seasons.
So here's the situation with Rondo. We do have to recognize, while he was okay in the regular season, it was playoff Rondo that has everybody talking. He really just kind of skirted and skated and, picked this kind of spots throughout the regular season. 8-8, definitely not bad when it comes to the assists. 8-4 is what he averaged in the regular season. Again, solid for where he is and where he is. But, in the playoffs, almost averaging a triple-double, that's completely a different story. Mm-hmm. Now, we say all that to say this, because the biggest problem that New Orleans has is not necessarily even whether to bring Cousins back, but you have to understand that Cousins is not going to be ready for the beginning of the season. So even when he does come back, it might be mid around the All-Star break. Then he's got to get his legs and the whole nine. Now it's a hell of a punch in the arm to get, to get an all NBA level talent back midway through the season. But where does your team stand and what identity do they have without you? at that point. And I think that's all the trepidation that is happening in New Orleans right now, because it's not just, okay, well, Cousins got hurt, he'll be back to begin the regular season. Do we want to tie up and pay him $200 million? It's all right. Well, next year he's not here for a good majority of it, and that's where I think even what you're saying, becomes pseudo valid in a lot of ways too, because again, it brings a lot of questions into play, and that's why signing and keeping Mirotic or picking up the option for Mirotic next year was huge, huge, huge for them, because it allows them to have somebody who's of value and can stretch the floor and can rebound and be as a placeholder when Cousins does eventually come back. And then if he does come back and can play at a certain level, then you bring in Mirotic off the bench, can give you another punch in the arm and make you a very valuable talent in the Western Conference either way.
It's really tough. But I would think that I would like to have this type of problem if I'm, Will Dempson company. I would love to have this being my problem than the problems that they've had in years past. Okay?
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, Shaw, is if the guys are playing for Boogie Cousins and Boogie Cousins is showing you that he wants to be a part of this team, he may actually favor more to helping out the New Orleans Pelicans financially from a contractual scenario that will enable them to help bolster this roster. Because above anything else, I know that one of the keys for this team is that they definitely need to shore up their bench. Outside of Mirotic, so to speak, because he obviously had to replace Cousins, they really don't have a whole lot going for them. Yeah, they may have had Ian Clark, but I think obviously that is a failed project. I think that whoever you're going to get, you have to get someone that supplements what Rondo won't give you, that you don't have to ask Jrue Holiday to keep giving you, right? Because part of the reason why I think it's so important why Rondo is he is allowed. You remember, and I know I've seen it. I speak about it ad nauseum with how I talk about Jrue Holiday, right? So we can just go ahead and talk about that, with him. Jrue Holiday, man, the guy looks like he's a 5-tool player, but he's really solid at 3. Okay, and I feel like when you give Rondo the ball more, Jrue can be Jrue. You know what I'm saying? And if you start messing with this again, where you don't have a Rondo-like type player to get Jrue to play his natural position, which is scoring the damn basketball, you're setting yourself up to rear the ugly head that's happened with the Pelicans when you're asking your players to do too damn much, especially in Alvin Gentry's system. So if you're going to get a backup point guard, you need a backup point guard for Rondo where you're saying, you know what? I want someone that can score me the basketball, but can pass the basketball effectively. Ian Clark is not effective that way. He's more of like he's kind of like a speedy Jrue Holiday in a sense, but he don't score like Jrue Holiday. And so that's where they went wrong with this whole situation. And you have to think about that if you're trying to sustain what you got from this team in this past season.
Well, I just want to bring up a quick point. When you talk about their bench, they do need a lot of help for sure. And the key caveat to them keeping Mirotic for next year, basically to help them mitigate the loss of Cousins, is the fact that they had to give up their first round pick to Chicago. So although it'd be a late first rounder, you'd feel like, okay, that could somebody that could help your bench, whether that be at the wing position, that small forward position, which is also a problem, or whether that is a true backup point guard. So they do have some issues here, and they're not just going to be able to go out there and sign the world. They have, I think, a pick or two in the second round, and maybe they can figure that out. Or does it become, again, like I said before, moving a guy like Solomon Hill, or maybe even Etuan Moore, moving them together and trying to find a way to get some other picks together one way or another, so that they can shore up the rest of this bench. To me, again, Solomon Hill is just dead weight. Like, there's just no reason to keep him on the roster. Darius Miller, dead weight. So if you can get rid of those guys some way or another.
These sound like anchors for where you're ditching the body bags. Like, should we autopsy report Darius Miller and Solomon Hill alone and forget the team?
I got nothing against them, but what did they contribute to this roster that has
finally at least you're against something?
The top best talent.
I feel like I've been against everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, finally you're against them.
So I think Dell Demps has to figure out some stuff when it comes to like those trimming the fat, so to speak, with some of those guys who aren't really doing much for them, and then figuring out a way to maybe try to get into this first round. Again, Solomon Hill and Etuan Moore and those guys aren't getting you a first round pick, even in the late 20s. But something, get creative, figure out a way to do something so that you can get some talent.
Check Diallo. Like I just,
Ugh.
like I don't understand.
Well, no, she played all right. I mean, I think
but my thing is, and again, this is to me the evolution process of Alvin Gentry. He's gonna have to start playing these guys. He really is. Like the only way that you're gonna know where you need to fix your team, you've got to put them in situations where they are outside of their norms. Okay, this is outside. This is an outside norm for them. They were never playoff consistent, right? And they didn't have their other superstar player. So if I'm Alvin Gentry, I got to get these guys out there and I got to see, man, because if this is a basketball team that got you 48 wins without their other superstar, and you're going to come back into this next season, don't give me this crap about, oh, yeah, well, now that we have what we have, we'll definitely be like a 55, 56 win team, but yet you barely play these guys to really see what they're going to contribute for you. You know what I'm saying? And I get it. It's the regular season, but the best way to really gauge the importance for what you're asking of these guys is probably by knowing that you're in the playoffs and you're playing them. I'm not saying play 15 deep, but there are a bunch of guys that are on this roster that because you didn't play them, you just obviously didn't trust them enough to be competitive. I don't get that.
It sounds like you're hunting after Alvin Gentry's job. Listen, man, AD saved the guy's job, got a contract extension. He's good to go next year.
AD can do all things, damn it. AD can do all things. Anno Dominion and Unibrow. He does all things, okay? But I'm just saying.
Let Gentry live a little bit, man.
Okay.
Let him live a little bit.
I'll let him breathe. And
let Dell Demps figure it out for this team, especially in the case of Rondo and Cousins, and see what they can do moving forward. But we got to get to this last team, man.
Oh, my Lord.
So lots of vitriol.
We should get the Undertaker music. We should get the Undertaker music, the theme song, right? Like his entry song. We should just get that right now to talk about the team.
Yeah, and play like Thanos.
I wish
his opening line.
I can't wait for us to do video, Shaw. We'd have an awesome vignette. Like we'll have Jurassic World, the Fallen Kingdom, right?
Damn.
It's just screaming Chris Pratt to come and do the intro for us. Maybe we can get Drake. He ain't busy, right?
He ain't doing nothing.
He ain't doing nothing for right now. We have to double up on this autopsy when we're talking about this Toronto Raptors team, because not only did the Raptors basically kill our hopes and dreams of somebody knocking off the Cavs, they went ahead and just decided to just kill themselves off. And the first part of this whole scenario and situation is what's just transpired with reference to Dwayne Casey. I'm actually a little flustered by this because as much as I have respect and admiration for Masai Ujiri and the work that he's done for the Raptors, this may single-handedly be one of the worst moves, knee-jerk reaction type moves that he's done ever in his tenure as being an executive in the NBA.
But I think it's one of those situations where Masai himself, wasn't comfortable with it, but felt like this is the direction that they needed to go. A lot of speculation when it comes to the Raptors being ousted in the 4-game sweep against the Cavs was, all right, well, what changes were they going to make? As we do the autopsy report, this is really what the tenor of that conversation is. What does a team do next? And without having a whole lot of cap flexibility, and we would start to wonder, all right, well, the core, does it stay together? And Lowry and DeRozan and Valanciunas and Ibaka, I think part of our conversation would even be like, all right, well, who would want DeRozan and Lowry at this point, knowing that they haven't showed the mental fortitude, in essence, to stand up in the game's pressure and high pressure moments. So you try to get somebody who could maybe reach them in a different way. And that's why Dwayne Casey becomes the fall guy in this situation for Toronto Raptors, again, because they don't have a whole lot of flexibility that they can do outside of this roster. So they're going to go with the head coach first and foremost. And Masai himself, he wasn't comfortable. He was extremely fidgety, even in the press conference, and said as much like this Toronto Raptors organization really is a family in a lot of ways. And they had to dismiss one of their family members.
Yeah, but here's the thing that part of me is not buying it. And I'm not saying this to just outright diss Masai Ujiri. But the reason why I'm not buying this, Shaw, is because this isn't a question of Dwayne Casey's voice not permeating through the locker room. Dwayne Casey has improved the Toronto Raptors regular season record each of the last 3 years, 50 plus wins. No coach in Raptors history has even come close to that, has even sniffed this, right? And you just begin to wonder again. I understand that it's an embarrassment to get beaten down the way that you got beaten down by the Cavs. And maybe it speaks more about the mental aspect of things, which is where I would challenge a guy like Dwayne Casey to figure this out if it doesn't turn out this upcoming season. Not after what this team has accomplished and achieved, because it almost in a way, it smacks in the face of letting off guys that you know need to really help and figure this out with Dwayne Casey off the hook. And at the end of the day, the executive, Masai Ujiri, can make that call and make that decision, because it's not like he hasn't done this before. But it does not absolve the fact that for the Toronto Raptors, for them to even be, they to me are the East Coast version of the Los Angeles Clippers. And that's what it just feels like in doing what they just did.
Well, I mean, again, something needed to be done. And, whether or not we agree that it's Casey that was going to be the fall guy, they just couldn't run it back. With the cap strap situation.
Okay, so before you go any further, Shaw, let me challenge you with this question. You're saying something has to be done. You're saying something has to be done from a front office perspective, or you're saying something has to be done with the personnel of the roster? Like, what would you say should actually be done first and foremost with reference to this team, given what's happened to them just in the playoffs?
It has to start with the roster or the construction thereof, or how the roster is reached. And what I'm saying is that $127 million already committed next year. You have the best bench in the NBA this year, and now you also have to figure out a way to re-sign Fred VanVleet, who's also going to be a free agent this summer. How do you bring all that back? You did all that and didn't succeed. It didn't have success. You changed your offense. Questions about Lowry, DeRozan being moved, questions about Casey being fired last year. All that happened last year. You decided to re-up and change your offense and do some player development. And all of those things worked well and were positive, but only for the regular season. And I liken this in a lot of ways, to use a baseball reference. Well, there was, what was it, Mike Hargrove or something like that? And it wasn't Hargrove, but the Cleveland Indians coach many, many years ago in baseball, where the Indians were so successful, but they could never get past that goal. They couldn't win the chip. And I think this is what the Raptors are. And, that man and LeBron James ousted them again. And that's a problem.
Okay. So let me retort with a challenge. What are you going to find to help this team get over the hump? I'll keep this in a basketball reference. I'll correlate this to what happened with the Golden State Warriors, right? You had a solid coach in Mark Jackson. The problem was that Mark Jackson was clashing with management, which at some point is going to permeate to how the players are now going to be put in the middle of that battleground, right? You're going to have to choose the coach. You have to choose the management. And ultimately, management made it easy. And if you're going to go after somebody, you're going to go after someone who deviates away from what was already built. So I guess my question is that what we're talking about here is saying the Toronto Raptors as a team who in the beginning part of this year, we didn't say that they were supposed to be the best team in the Eastern Conference. We had to wait and see what this team was going to do for us to formulate that train of thought, right? And so somehow that is part Casey, because he had to buy into the idea of changing his philosophy of how to coach this team like he did in the previous season. So you're telling me that we get to this point now, and again, they get ran out the gym by LeBron James. I do not deny this. But who is Masai Ujiri going to go find to now elevate this team, I guess, to whatever this next level is supposed to be, if we're perceiving that this team, like the Golden State Warriors, have the requisite pieces that is always saying that they should be the number one team in the Eastern Conference, or should be the team that is the Eastern Conference representation for the NBA Finals year in and year out?
Well, I mean, I think there's a larger list of guys. I mean, we know a lot of coaching positions are currently available right now. And there's a lot of coaching candidates that are available. And whether or not you wanted to go with somebody more well-established, like a Van Gundy or a Mark Jackson, as you're alluding to, even maybe a Frank Vogel, all the San Antonio Spurs assistants are interviewing. Philadelphia's assistants are interviewing. Atlanta's assistants are interviewing. So there's the guys available, and I think they're going to take the time now, in essence, to really see, okay, who can reach our guys on another level and get them and give them that mental toughness. Because, like I'm saying, I think what you really have to understand, for at least from my standpoint, is who could they move? But if your retort is that, okay, you just want to run it back, and then, all right, let's see if we can do it again. At some point, that argument it falls on deaf ears, and they're not going to be able to do that.
All right, so you give me your percentage of confidence. Percentage of confidence that this was the right decision, or even the best decision for the Toronto Raptors as they head into the off season.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll double down on that, or even backtrack, is where I think I'm 50-50. I'm looking at what they can do and what is typically done in this situation as well too. We always know the head coach is kind of the first to go. And Casey ended up being the fall guy. And again, it's extremely ironic. You lead your team to franchise season high in wins, and you're a coach of the year by your own peers. You have the best bench of the NBA. You have the number 1 seed, and you got swept in the second round against somebody who you have historically not figured out a way to beat. Again, he's the fall guy, but I think it's a 50-50 decision right now, and we have to wait to see who they put into this position moving forward, and if they can do any other roster tweaks. And who's to say Masai's not done? Who's to say that he doesn't try to do something maybe from a smaller point?
I'm not saying that Masai is not done. I would hope that that's not the case, because clearly then that's really speaking how, farsighted he's really looking at this situation. That clearly he's allowing too many voices to dictate, what, again, I amount to being as a knee-jerk reaction to a situation that, yes, it called for something to be done. It's hard to imagine, especially if we say the Toronto Raptors are a great, well-rounded basketball team amongst all of the other teams participating in the NBA.
So I guess, I know we got to wrap it up, but then what exactly is that you think they should have did? Like, just, really quickly, what should have Masai Ujiri and the Raptors done?
I really think that first of all, I would have thought that Dwayne Casey's input would have played a factor in how much work Masai was going to need to do with this basketball team in the offseason. And again, I'm hearkening to the fact that it's not tenable with this starting 5 that they have. Okay, it's Ibaka and Valanciunas. It's just not going to work.
And I don't disagree in terms of how hard it is to make a move. I think that's something that we both agree on. But what that move is and what that looks like. Again, they could not be done, and you really feel like they need some sort of spiritual and emotional leader at the head coaching position to maybe get them to that next level. And again, Dwayne Casey, by all accounts, is a stand-up professional, just great guy to have within your organization. But maybe his voice just was lost on what they were able to do. And again, it ended up costing his job, because you're talking about, all right, well, do you come back harder? They did come back harder this year. That's why they had the success they did in the regular season, when people were kind of writing them off. And I remember very distinctly we were talking about this team as, are they kind of the Spurs, where we're just kind of tired of talking about them again, and they haven't even had the same level of success as the Spurs have had. But it's just like, all right, well, they're pretty good, but you don't take them seriously. And I think they did come back very hard this year and made a strong push, and they fell flat on their faces, including Casey.
I really think, though, Shaw, and listen, I don't disagree where you're coming from. I think where it sets on me that this doesn't feel right and it doesn't sound right, and it's probably not even going to taste right.
They have some decisions to make before the NBA draft. And then obviously they'll have summer free agency to get into the ear of some players and coaches as well, and other teams as well. So Toronto most likely not done, but for right now, we're done. Wrapping up with the North. Spirited conversation, Dwayne Casey and Toronto Raptors, man. We'll see what happens moving forward.
Most definitely. So once again, we'd like to thank each and every single one of you guys for tuning in, catching us as we give you the autopsy reports. We bodied them up and zipped them down. It's time to put them inside that dirt. And hey, these teams got to put in that work in the off season. For the baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.